So I want to tell you a little bit about Becky, and we're hoping that she can get online. It's so many of us live in areas that where the storms come through and they just totally wreck our communication systems. But I met Becky actually on a webinar on a different topic of community foundations in Kansas. And she was telling a story of how her community foundation has really been able to grow because of the storytelling that they're doing. And this idea of giving visibility to what a community foundation does. In the United States, some people who are in community foundations say it's the best kept secret in the community. Like it's nobody knows about the community foundation. Sometimes they don't want that visibility. But what Becky found was that the more people knew about what the community foundation did in the community and with the community, the more people wanted to get involved with what was going on. So it's really served them to be able to grow not only financially, but in the partnerships that they've been able to develop within the community. I'd like to take you to their website. So I'm going to share the screen. Can everyone see this? Okay, good. So the Emporia Community Foundation is, I believe, in Eastern Kansas. They're in a very rural area. They do a lot of farming in that area. They don't have a large population. And Becky came in a while ago. Her background is in marketing and a little bit in journalism. So she came in with this vision of really growing the visibility of the community foundation. And she, on their website, I'll take you to the home page. So this is what their home page looks like. Ways to give. They do a great match day where they get the nonprofits of their community involved, and then the community foundation is able to match what they've given. And if you go to the top and the very right where it says legacy, under here there are stories of legacy. I'm just talking about this word legacy because we have like different languages here. So this idea of leaving some of your personal assets to a community foundation after you have died or in the name of someone you love. Is that how you would describe that, Becky?
Well, the way I describe legacy is making sure that what you're passionate about continues in the future. If you're passionate about rescuing animals, then you can leave money with a community foundation and it will provide income for your particular interest for the future. Say, for instance, you're interested in preserving a historic landmark. Say, for instance, you're interested in scholarships for a particular, like nursing.
This is a workshop about how can we relate stories of people within our community and the amazing work they're doing. Sometimes it's about the legacy that they're leaving. So Becky has this background in marketing. She came to the community foundation from a different type of job. And she really built this idea of storytelling within the community foundation. In this part of legacy is where you can find several of the stories that they have been able to do over the years. And what they've done is build a relationship with their local television station, and also the local radio. I believe they also have printed news.
Okay. I said it was radio and newspaper.
So one of the stories that we wanted to share with you today was written in December 2022. And what you'll hear is actually Becky's voice. Because she worked in television and radio, she was able to do these herself. She had that relationship with them. So think about, as you're listening to this, think about, how is this story being told? What are they focusing on? What are maybe some of the emotions that are awakened through this story? And does it relate to anything that you might tell about your own community? And let me know, Minerva, how the sound is on this, because I'm just playing it off my computer.
Here's Becky Nurnberg, Executive Director of the Emporia Community Foundation, with a Flint Hills legacy.
Normally, legacies are about older people who are financially successful or passionate about a cause, and when they have passed on, they leave a gift for the future. But this Christmas season, we're featuring a new legacy fund set up by grandparents in memory of a very special young lady who was taken too soon by leukemia, Reese Tamlin Naylor. Reese came from a very close family, and Christmas traditions like hiding the Christmas pickle in the tree were special for them. If Reese wasn't able to be with the family for Christmas, they would wait until she was out of the hospital because they believe Christmas is about being with family. Reese's mom would host a baking day a few weeks before Christmas. That day was special as Reese loved to bake just about anything. One time, Reese and her Nana, Donna Russell, shot a video on making brownies. Nana hid behind Reese, putting her arms around her granddaughter. Reese talked to the camera, giving instructions on how to make the brownies, and her Nana's hands mixed the ingredients. It was so messy, but the fun and laughter in the video are special memories. The hardest Christmas was when Reese was a patient at Children's Mercy Hospital. It was not a normal Christmas for the family, but they did their best to make it special for Reese. One morning, Reese laughed so hard as when she woke up, there were two elves on a shelf who had made beds out of tissue boxes, and they both had IVs with Coca-Cola going through their IVs. And Reese knew she didn't have long to live. One of her last comments was, "Nana, we are going to do this with joy." Reese Naylor was 13 when she passed. One of her doctors said Reese had an indelible impact on medical students, residents, and physicians due to her grace, strength, and the amazing love of her family. So the legacy of this incredible young lady is the Reese Naylor Joy Fund. This legacy fund will support projects, programs, or events for local chronically ill or terminal kids and their families with happiness, joy, and memories. Reese's Nana said this is why the fund has been established, as Reese knew how important joy is when life gets hard. To contribute to this fund or learn how to make memories with your own fund, contact the Emporia Community Foundation. What is your legacy?
To learn more about how you can make an impact, contact Becky Nurnberg, Executive Director of the Emporia Community Foundation, 342-9304, or stop by 527 Commercial, Suite B, Emporia.
Well, Lisa, that sounds familiar. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I have, we've got terrible heat and solar flares out here. We live in the prairie, the Flint Hills of Kansas, and it has just done havoc with our GPS on our equipment and and our computers and everything else. So I apologize.
That's absolutely okay. And I do realize that this recording, you spoke quite fast on this, and I'm sure everyone in Kansas understood you, but it's for the interpretation, it went quite fast.
Okay.
But what I'd love to ask from those of you listening and who were able to really catch on to everything, what was this story focusing on?
You're asking that of me?
No, I'm asking the rest of the
Okay.
participants.
Okay.
What did you hear from this story? There's about a little girl named Reese, but what did Becky focus on as far as her story goes? Did you catch anything in particular?
The joy the family was able to bring to her in spite of the hardship and the
Yeah.
sad situation, to the point that she became a very inspiring person.
Okay,
With
so did
philosophical attitude as a very, very young person. What an
Yeah.
impact on the community. So
Thank
it's
you.
a
Mhm.
very touching story.
It's a very what story?
Touching story.
Right.
It's a good story
Okay.
to me. It's really
Yeah.
good.
Did you feel like it was a sad story, or is it more upbeat, happy?
Well, yeah, a very young person dying so early, it feels sad, but it's uplifting in terms of the attitude the family was able to maintain
Yes.
and to keep an atmosphere of joy around her and significance and relevance of her life and her message.
Okay. Thank you, Carolina. And you're joining us from Haiti today.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so happy that you're here. Thank you.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
yeah. Any other comments about how this story was? I mean, because in a situation where you have a child with leukemia, you could focus on the leukemia, you could focus on the dying. It can be a very sad story, and this is why you need to donate. Or it can focus on the joy and on the family and on the wonderful memories of this child that you want to live on forever. Right. And so what I saw this and with Becky is we have a choice of how we're telling the story. We can focus on the deficits, the sad, the bad things in our community, or we can focus on the resilience and the joy and the family and encourage that to be brought out. And so I think my lesson in that was just why focus on the joy? You know, how can we really bring about resilience and family and community in the stories that we tell? Reese, this idea of like, how can we use the positive things coming out of it? How can we tell more stories about those remittances, family sending family support, which is more support than they get from everyone else? And I'm going to turn the conversation back to Becky at this point, because I really want you to hear a little bit more about her background, and how she was thinking about this when she was at the Community Foundation to really capitalize on the positive stories of normal people in her community, to be able to encourage participation from
And
everyone.
it worked.
Yes, exactly. So Becky, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
Great. Can you tell us just a little bit about your background before you came to the foundation? And then when you got to the Community Foundation, what was your goal in the storytelling that you did?
My background is I am originally from Michigan, and while I was there, I worked for the Farm Bureau organization. I was the first woman regional representative and one of the first 4 in the United States. And I worked deeply with agriculture there, but I also did stories because I had a television show while I was with Farm Bureau for a number of years and told the stories of agriculture. And then I had some things in my life that changed and I needed to move, and I moved to Illinois. And while I was living in Springfield, Illinois, I worked for the Hispanic Dental Association. I was the executive director there, and then eventually was recruited and worked for the ABC television affiliate in sales and marketing for them. And, you know, whether you're in sales or whether you're in a nonprofit, you've got a story to tell. And when you can get examples and use those examples when you're talking to people, it just helps bring things along. Well, how I ended up out in Kansas, if any of you have ever heard the tagline, I didn't want to be lonely anymore. I went on to farmersonly.com. I was single, went on to farmersonly.com and met my husband on an internet access website. Never been to Emporia, Kansas in my life, and ended up eventually moving out here. But before I moved, I knew I wanted to have a good job out here because I was a senior account executive for Sinclair Broadcast Group in Springfield. And I met a woman who told me about the Community Foundation. Frankly, community foundations are some of the best kept secrets out there because, and other foundations, people are not aware of what a community foundation is and what it can do. And when I met Kay in 2015, she said when they reached total assets of 20 million, they were going to hire a full-time executive director. And she contacted me the end of 2016, and I was hired in 2017 because they had reached 20 million. And like I said, it's some of the best kept secrets, community foundations. And we have so many other things to do when we're with a foundation, whether it's a community foundation or other, you know, bringing in funds and making sure your grants are done and all that. But that's where my background with marketing really helped, was I developed a really good relationship. In Emporia, our total population for the entire county is only 32,000. And we serve the surrounding counties around our area. And the total population in all the surrounding counties is just a little over 77,000. In fact, the county where we have our farm and ranch, our main operation over here, we have more cattle than people. We only have 2,500 people in our county, our entire county. It's huge geographically. And people were not aware of the Community Foundation. And so we only had one main radio station in town and one main newspaper. It's one of the oldest newspapers in the country that's still family owned and operated. And they both were big supporters of the Community Foundation. But that's when I started doing things like press releases. And we got them involved with our events. And during COVID, as you can tell, I have terrible problems with the internet out here where our ranch is. And so we were supposed to shut the office down. I shut the office down, but I had to go back to the office to work because I didn't have any internet out here. And I met somebody and I started working on legacies and the legacy program. And I put together materials. And if you don't have a marketing packet, what I called our marketing packet, if you don't have materials, because you always tell stories, whether it's talking about how to donate assets. I would talk about, we had a farmer and a rancher north of here who donates truckloads of soybeans. And that's how and it works out for him tax-wise. And so when you talk about these various things, have stories that are pertinent to what you're talking about. But I also wanted to get the legacy out there and talk about legacies. And I came up with the idea about doing the legacy stories and doing them on the radio. And I approached our radio station. And that's the other thing with working with media. I didn't ask for it for free. I went and sat down with their business manager and I said, how much would it cost us? And we figured out the best times to run them and what we would do. And he gave me a price and we paid for them. Don't over ask on your media people. They'll come through and do wonderful things for you, but they also have to eat and feed their families too. And it wasn't really very expensive here in Emporia for us to do these stories. But I sat down and worked with them and then developed the stories. So Lisa, where do you want me to go from here?
So Becky, your story about Reese, and most of these I see on here, what are they, about 2 minutes long? 2.5?
That's the beauty of radio. It was supposed, when I sat down with them at first, they were supposed to be 1.5 minutes long and supposed to have 15-second tag to the opening and a 15-second ending. And I got a little winded on one of them. It was over 3 minutes. They kept getting longer and longer. And with radio, you can do that. Television, you can't. Television has a hard and fast break. But radio, and one month it was 3.5 minutes, and I turned to the general manager and I said, "This is 3.5 minutes. Where are we going to cut it?" And he started laughing and he says, "Well, because it's a story about the owner's parents, I don't think he'll mind." So we kept them around 2.5 minutes, and then they added a 15-second open and a 15-second close.
Okay.
But that's something you need to work out with the people at the radio station when you go and talk to them.
Okay. And what about when you're writing? If you're writing a story that you want to put either on your website, on a blog, or even in the newspaper, do you have a parameter of how long, like the maximum length it should be? I mean, because we're always talking about the attention span of the audience, right? What is your experience on that?
In my experience from working in television and radio, what I do for my scripts, when I do my scripts that I'd read from, I try to keep them about 2.25 pages double spaced. And I used, this is one thing I always did with radio too, or television, is I would type it all cap when I was writing it. And you got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it has to be logical and in sequence. And you need to have some type of an intro that catches their attention. About the little girl who left her legacy or whatever. But, and don't put a lot of stuff. I mean, find some things that people like aha moments. Like, I did one story. There was a family in Emporia. They own 3 grocery stores, and they're very generous. And he's passed away now, and his wife is still living. She's 93 and drives around in her Cadillac. And everybody figured that they were always very wealthy. And in doing my research, I found out that wasn't always the case. And so I did a story one month about Barney Riebel. And Barney Riebel grew up, put himself through college with a truck farm and a mule. And people were shocked. And people love those stories because they all knew, everybody knows the Riebels in our town. It's a small town. And they couldn't hardly believe that Barney didn't have money when he was a teenager and in his early 20s and worked that way. And so you find interesting things. And where I did my research, if they'd passed away, if they still had family, I'd talk to the family. And if they still had family, I always got permission from the family to go ahead. And usually they were really excited. But, I talked to the family, look in obituaries, Google the name, and you'll get lots of information usually that way.
Okay. So Becky, in an international call like this, one of the big difference between community foundations and especially fundraising in the United States versus many countries in Latin America is that people in the United States leaving a legacy to a public foundation is actually a fairly common practice, right? Much of Latin America, people have never heard of that, or they would never think, there's not as much trust, I think, in public institutions.
Well, and also, also, like I said, I worked for a number of years for the Hispanic Dental Association, and I'm not Hispanic. I'm Danish. And the Hispanic Dental Association, when they hired me, they were in trouble financially. And so, and I got them, when I left, they had money in the bank. And one thing that I've learned, and in Emporia, we have about 30% Hispanic in our community. And it's not just from Mexico, it's from, other Latin American countries and things like that. Frankly, the Hispanic community, they take care of themselves, is what I found. And they are generous with their families, but you're right, they don't they don't feel comfortable leaving money and supporting different things like that. And that's one of the things. We had an organization called Hispanics of Today and Tomorrow, HOT is their acronym. And they really struggled a lot of times. They could get a lot of support from other places, but and they did get some support, but the Hispanic families really take care of themselves in a lot of cases.
And I wonder if lifting up some of those some of those stories
Mm-hmm.
as a community foundation, I'm just thinking here now, even if
Mhm.
maybe we're not directly donating to the foundation, but recognizing that they're part of our community.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
And there's
it would
things
be
that,
valuable to lift up some of those stories in honor of them?
either the stories or projects and things that are done. We have a young man in our community that he's not Hispanic. Actually, he's African American, and he was an All-American. He's from Emporia, and he went to play football for Oklahoma State, and he was their outstanding football player for 5 years in a row. And he came back to Emporia. He has a real love. He grew up in that area where most of our Hispanic families live in Emporia, and he has a real love for them. And he's an artist besides being a tremendous football player. And that's one of the things that we were able to do was he painted murals, and it really brought attention and brought a lot of Hispanic families into our, coming around and looking at their community like that, because he was improving their community for their families.
Mm-hmm.
And the murals are beautiful. And he also does, we've got a young lady who she's involved with the chamber and does all kinds of Hispanic events for the Hispanic community to encourage them in business, and they also started a Spanish-speaking club that has been wildly popular for non-Hispanics to learn how to speak the language. And Emporia really has embraced the Hispanic community, and there's good response too.
So those are amazing stories to tell as well, right? The different ways that people are contributing to their communities. Yeah, I love that. Does anyone have any questions for Becky as far as what she has learned about her approach to storytelling? Because in a few minutes, I want to give you time to just write a little bit, each of you yourselves. But what questions do you have for Becky? Yes, Jimmy. And you'll be asking in English or Spanish?
En español en esta ocasión.
Okay, I'll translate for you because I think Becky won't be able to listen to the interpretation.
That's right.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Me daba curiosidad para poder construir estas historias, si recogían la información o conversaban, entrevistaban, por ejemplo, el caso de la niña, o solo lo construía con su equipo. ¿Cómo fue esa parte de la estructura de la historia?
Okay, great. Jimmy is from Peru, a new community foundation in Peru. And he's asking, for many of your stories, did you actually go and interview them or have a conversation with them? Or is it sometimes just getting secondhand information about them?
With most of them, they're gone, they're passed on. And if they had families who were still in the area or alive, then I would try and get information from them. But some of the situations, we have a school teacher who was an old maid school teacher, and she passed away in 1947, and I looked and there was no family in the area. But so I did my research, and we had a copy of her will in our files. And so, you know, I got information that way. If they do have families who are still in the area, always get permission, always ask them.
Mm-hmm. What about if you wanted to write a story with somebody who is living in the community still? Would you prefer to interview them or just ask permission about a story that maybe you heard in the
If they were
community?
still if they were still alive, and had set up a legacy fund, I would definitely talk to them, and I would definitely clear everything with them, because with a legacy fund, most legacy funds aren't funded until they're gone. They'll set it the way a legacy fund with our foundation was set up. They would set up an agreement, but they could always take it back. So say, for instance, you have somebody and you want to make sure that they agree with it, because you don't want them taking that back.
Right. Okay. Anyone else with questions for Becky about how she writes her stories? Okay, are you all ready to do some work on your own? What we're hoping is that listening to Reese's story and talking to Becky, that your mind is thinking about who is there in our community connected to our community foundation who we could write a story about. And so the idea for today is to give you about 20 minutes. I'll try to play some music in the background, because I know when the call is over, you have to go back to work and you have 1,000 things to do. So this is 20 minutes that we're giving you to focus on a local story, somebody in your community. It does not need to be a legacy story. It could be about someone who's just lived the generosity in a way in their community that has helped each other. It could be about a community leader or a nonprofit that you work with. It could be about somebody locally or a local business that has decided to support projects in the community and you want to lift up their story. And then in July, when we come back, and you've had a month to maybe work on this story a little bit, we're going to put you into breakout rooms again and share your thoughts on a story with somebody else who's on the call. And then we're going to listen to another person from a community foundation and the stories that they tell.